Here we are in Piata Universității. It's the centre of Bucharest. For those of you who are interested in history, this is where much of the action, shall we say, of the Romanian Revolution in Bucharest took place. There was a lot of fighting here, with gunfire coming both from inside the university building, which is behind me, as well as the Intercontinental Hotel, which you can see to your left. There were barricades here on the evening of the 22nd of December 1989, and the first people to be killed in the revolution in Bucharest were actually killed here, and there is a memorial to them in the middle of the square. But because of the traffic, which you can see is absolutely crazy, it's very, very difficult to get to. Behind Piata Universității is what's known colloquially as the Russian Church. Officially it's the Students' Church, but for two reasons it's known more commonly as the Russian Church. The first reason is obvious, it looks very much like a Russian church. The second reason is that it was completed in 1909 with money donated by the then Russian Tsar Alexander II. It's also said to be an exact replica, a smaller replica, of the Angkor Cathedral. This is the National Bank of Romania. It was finished in 1885 and was designed by a French architect called Albert Galeron, who was also responsible for a number of other buildings in Bucharest. French architects were very, very popular in the city at the time. It stands very much at the entrance to Bucharest's Old Town, and although over the years the building has become very much hemmed in, it's still one that you should really try and admire, although you can't really do so at a distance anymore. While nobody can really argue with the fact that Bucharest has come a long way in the last 20 years, the city still has a massive stray dog problem. Nobody knows exactly how many stray dogs there are in the city. It could be as many as 60 or 70,000. And while they are relatively few in and around the city centre now, you'll still see a few of them dozing like these three are behind me. This is Strada Lipscani, which is the centre of old Bucharest, and the street actually gives its name to the whole area. Most locals refer to this area just as Lipscani. The street gets its name from the German town of Leipzig, because in the 16th and 17th centuries lots of traders came here from Leipzig to sell their wares to locals and to the Turks. This was a major trading post in those days. A couple of years ago the City Council decided to renovate the whole area, at least repaving the streets and making it a pedestrian zone. As they did so, they discovered the ruins of a number of old buildings. The ruins that you can see behind me are actually those of an inn. And right now there's a bit of an argument going on amongst the councillors at Bucharest City Council. They simply don't know what to do with the ruins. Some people are in favour of simply paving them over and carrying on as though they're not there, while others want to preserve them and to make some kind of outdoor monument. And while the arguing goes on, the weeds still continue to grow. This is Strada Smardan, which was the first street in the whole Lipscani area to be completely renovated and completely repaved, and it's also been completely pedestrianised. No cars are allowed here. In a very quick space of time, over the past 6 months to a year, it's become perhaps the most important nightlife street in Bucharest, and it's now completely covered with cafes, restaurants, bars and nightclubs. This somewhat derelict building behind me used to be the Hotel Concordia, and in 1859 the first Parliament of Wallachia elected a chap called Ioan Cuza to be the Prince of Wallachia. And as the deputies of Moldavia had done the same 2 weeks previously, to all intents and purposes the decision in here created the first state of Romania. So we're on Strada Francesa now, which like Strada Smardan has been completely repaved and completely pedestrianised. Unfortunately, while they've resurfaced the street, most of the buildings along Strada Francesa still need a great deal of work, which is a shame because, you know, they were once fabulous buildings and they could be again with a little bit of love and care. So it's not all good news in Lipscani. There are still a few streets which have been dug up for renovation and repaving, but they've just been left like that by the City Council, and this is one of them. This is Strada Gabroven. It doesn't, however, stop it being another great nightlife destination, and there are in fact a couple of great live music places on this street. This is Hanul Manuc, which is the oldest surviving caravanserai or inn in the whole of Bucharest. It's been here since the 17th century. Unfortunately, it's closed at the moment, and it has been for some time now because of issues regarding its actual ownership. The state confiscated it from the original owners when the communists took over in 1947, and the original owners are currently trying to get it back, but so far have been unsuccessful in their attempts to do so. This is St Anthony's Church, which is the oldest church in Bucharest, and in fact this is very much ground zero for the city. This was where Bucharest began in the 15th century when the princely court and this church were founded. As you can see, probably there are still people going in and out of the church even though it's a Monday. It's very busy, and this reflects the fact that Romania is still a very religious country with people going to church almost every day. I'm standing in the middle of Piatta Unirii, which is quite literally the centre of Bucharest. Now, until the early 1980s, this whole area was very much like the old town area of Bucharest, the Lipscani area, full of small houses, churches, etc. And then in the early 1980s, the whole area was completely flattened to make way for what we see today, such as the monumental fountains, these enormous apartment blocks, and of course the Casa Poporului, which is right behind me, and which is said to be the second largest building in the world. The building behind me is Casa Poporului, or House of the People, as most people still call it. Its official title is actually Palatul Parlamentului, or Parliament Palace, because it's today home to the Romanian Parliament, the Romanian Senate, and it's also home to a conference centre as well as the Romanian Museum of Contemporary Art. Construction on the building began in 1984, and this whole area that the building is built on was actually cleared of houses, churches, schools, hospitals to make way for it. Now, construction didn't actually be completed until after the revolution in 1990, and it's said to be the second biggest building in the world, or the largest building used for administrative purposes. You can take a tour of the building, which it's well worth doing so, even though the commentary is a little bit boring because the people who do it will just tell you about it being the biggest.
Welcome to the Palace of Parliament. As I was saying, my name is Raluca and I will be your guide for today's tour. We are in a historical edifice placed in the very heart of Bucharest. This building is in the Guinness Book of Records on the second place after Pentagon, with 365,000 square meters, and on the third place after Cape Canaveral in Florida, and Casa called Pyramid in Mexico, with a total volume of 2,550,000 cubic meters. And I must point out the fact that all the materials used in this palace are genuine Romanian. We can talk about 1 million cubic meters of marble, 900,000 cubic meters of wood essences, and also 3,500 tons of mediash crystal, a crystal from which they made more or less 2,800 lamps and chandeliers.
We're at Piata Unirii metro station, which is one of the metro stations on the Bucharest metro system. It's not the most efficient metro system in the world. However, hundreds of thousands of people use it every day because it's the easiest way for them to get to and from work. However, as far as the visitor is concerned, it's not the most useful system in the world because the city centre is not particularly well served. We've got Piata Unirii station here as well as Universităţii, which might be of interest to the visitor. However, apart from that, there aren't many places that you really want to go. However, one place you can get to on the system is Gara de Nord, which is Bucharest's main railway station, with trains serving the whole of the country. On the western edge of the Lipscani area is this magnificent building behind me, which is now the National History Museum of Romania. It was built in the 19th century, and until 1972 it was actually the headquarters of the Romanian Post Office. Unfortunately, like most Romanian museums, it's far more impressive on the outside than it is in. A contender for the finest building in Bucharest is the building behind me, which is the CEC Building, and is the headquarters of the Romanian National Savings Bank. It dates from the early part of the 20th century and was designed by the same person, Albert Galeron, who also designed the National Bank. You'll find the CEC Building on the other side of Calea Victoriei to the National History Museum. This church behind me is one of the oldest in Bucharest. It dates from 1724 and it's known as the Stavropoleos Church, and you'll find it on the street of the same name. It's famous for its courtyard, which has a number of rather unusual tombstones. There are a couple of churches in the Lipscani area. The one behind me is dedicated to Saint Dumitru, who also happens to be the patron saint of Bucharest. This particular church was built in 1754, although it's been rebuilt a number of times since. And the one we see today is actually from only about 50 years ago. In the middle of Piața Revoluției is a memorial to the people who were killed in the revolution of 1989. More than 1,000 people were killed in the capital, and to this day nobody is sure who killed them, why, and on whose orders. The names of those who were killed are engraved on the walls that you can see behind me. And the centrepiece of this memorial is the huge obelisk which stands in front of me now, and which the people of Bucharest, somewhat unkindly perhaps, call the olive on the cocktail stick. The building behind me, which today is the Romanian Interior Ministry, was until 1989 the headquarters of the Communist Party Central Committee, and it's from the balcony of this building that Nicolae Ceausescu gave his last speech on December the 21st, 1989. He was booed in this square, Piata Universității, by a crowd which had actually been brought in to cheer him. And the following day he fled by helicopter from the roof. He was captured a little later and was finally shot on Christmas Day 1989. Most of the people who were killed in the revolution were actually killed in this square, and almost all of them were killed after, in fact, Ceausescu had fled the building. The house behind me was badly damaged in the revolution of 1989, and it stands on the edge of Piata Universității. It was then taken over by the Romanian Association of Architects, who turned it into the quite astonishing building that we see today. They kept the original shell, as you can see, and then they put a modern office building inside. And on the ground floor there is actually a cafe where you can go and enjoy a coffee. It's called I.O. Espresso. Another of the historic churches which you should really try and see when you're in Bucharest is the church behind me. It's the Crețulescu Church, and it was very badly damaged during the revolution of 1989. There was a lot of gunfire in this square, Piata Universității, and the church has only recently been completely restored. This building behind me is today Romania's National Art Museum, and it's one of the few museums in Bucharest which is really worth spending time in. The pick of the exhibits is the exhibition of medieval art on the first floor. The building was actually originally built as a private residence by a very wealthy landowner called Dumitru Church, but when his sons squandered their inheritance he was forced to sell it to the state, and it became the royal palace of Romania's first king. If you ask the people of Bucharest what their favourite building in the city is, then there's a fair chance that quite a few would actually say it's this building behind me, which is the Romanian Ateneum. It's Bucharest's primary concert hall, and it's home to Romania's most prestigious philharmonic orchestra, the George Enescu Philharmonic. There are concerts here most evenings, and you can guarantee to see something here on Fridays at 6:30. Bucharest's Arc de Triumf was put up to commemorate the Romanian soldiers who were killed in the First World War. The stone structure that you actually see today only went up in the 1930s. Originally it was built of wood. Annoyingly, although there's a perfectly good staircase up to the viewing platform at the top, it's only ever open to the public for 2 or 3 days a year, and the authorities only announce when it's going to be open a day or two in advance. If you've only got time to see one thing in Bucharest, then you probably are best off coming here to the city's village museum. It was set up in the 1930s as a way of bringing the village to the city, so that people could see how life was lived in the Romanian countryside. Behind me is a church which was brought piece by piece from the Maramureș region in the far north of Romania, and originally dates from 1772. Besides churches, there are also houses and windmills and all sorts of things from the countryside to see, and there are more than 300 different exhibits in the museum.